In a fantasy setting where you can be literally anyone, why would you want to play as the little guy? Hey everybody, my name is Ronald Long, and in today's video I'm going to ask the question, why would you want to play as the normal person in a wargaming game like Warhammer, 40K or Age of Sigmar? You guys understand. Right, when you play in a fantasy game, especially like video games, normally you get to control your character and you get to be this big, beefy, all-powerful person who eventually gets to take over the world or be able to actually take down a god-sized enemy. In Warhammer 40K and in Age of Sigmar, you get to be, I don't know, literal gods with what's going on here. It could be a armored space marine, so bulky and huge, and all this cool lore talking about how you came to be and all this engineering that went into you, or a literal god of thunder in a Stormcast Eternal, right? This is a big deal. So why in the world would you want to be just a regular Joe in any of those settings? You think of the Astra Militarum or the Imperial Guard, depending on how long you've been playing, they're just foot soldiers. Normal infantry with las guns, right? The joke is that it's a flashlight gun because it doesn't really do anything. Or maybe you think of old school Empire, the reason I got into wargaming in the first place. It's just a dude with a sword, right? That's all you are. Maybe you're a better dude with a sword, but at the end of the day, you're just a guy. Now, I know that sometimes people will talk about these two type of armies and then immediately go, well, it's the same reason I want to play like a horde army, right? Now, I'm not talking about playing as the Skaven in Age of Sigmar or even as Admech right now in 40K. Rest in peace, Admech. We are so sorry for all the things, and we hope the data slate does you good. No, I mean just being the regular Joe. Not a cooked up superhuman, not, somebody who's all that big and crazy scary, just a normal person who got recruited into the army, be it your space army or your fantasy army. Why in the world would you choose to play one of those factions? Now for me, those are the ones that really get me interested. And it's really crazy because, right, we live in a time where we can imagine. And you can imagine being space robots, or you can imagine being like big dwarves, or even like lizards riding dinosaurs, right? Those all sound really cool. They're just not the armies that I get really excited about. And here's why I think that. If you think any of these things or you disagree, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'm a small enough channel that I can basically interact with anything you've got to say. So I'd love to hear what you'd say down below. For me, one of the reasons that I love to play these types of armies is because they are just not a superhuman, right? I can't imagine myself as the big, burly, super overcooked hero who can do anything, or even just like the reanimated, clad in armor person, right? That I have a hard time like inserting myself into that narrative. But also, I really think there's just something really heroic about being the little guy. I love the command squad of the Astra Militarum, specifically the guy with the power fist, right? He looks big and bad. He's got the cigar in his mouth and his gun and the power fist. Really, truly, he's not doing anything. Like if an orc comes at him, no, the orc's going to win about 75% of the time, probably 90%. But there's something heroic about the little guy standing up to the big orc and facing him down. That's what I like to hear about and read. And even when I think about like the bigger armies that happen with the Astra Militarum, I think of these cohort of soldiers going together, fighting against like these wild odds. Can you imagine facing down like a giant tyrannid with just like your gun and the people beside you. There's something really heroic about that. Even though you're probably not going to make it out, it's still really cool to think about how that would happen in the game. And that's something that gets me real excited to play these factions. And even when it comes to like the Empire, like the old school, just a guy with a halberd, there's something really heroic about that to me as well. The idea that you're just a person who was given a weapon and sent to the front lines to fight, demons, or rest in peace, beastmen, or the elves who have lived for hundreds of years, and you're just there, right? You're just there, defending your homeland and doing what's right. Those types of stories, those are the ones that really get me. But I want to be fair. There are some reasons that it's really tough to play these armies. And it doesn't even necessarily have to go within the game, like the strategy. There's way more strategic things that you have to do with these types of armies, right? You can't just like throw them willy-nilly at your opponent because you know they're tough and they can make it. You've got to plan a little bit better. But there's some other reasons as well that I recognize it's a little tough to play one of these two armies. The first one is you are about to paint so many models. Now, I understand that's true for any horde army like Tyranids or Admech or Skaven, but yeah, you're about to paint a lot of not just models, but faces. That's a problem with playing the regular humans, is you have to paint the regular humans, and they have to look a little humanoid too, unlike most of the models that I paint that look like they're sick. I have a large Empire army. This one's not mine, but I have a considerable Empire army. In order to get the bulked up Empire army, you have to paint a lot of color. There's a lot of models that go into these big regular Joe armies because they are just the big regular Joes. And it also ends up being another problem as well. Your characters, remember the guy with the fist, right? The big fist, or your commissar, or your general, or your standard bearer, or your wizard. They are your heroes. They are the strongest people, characters in your army, and they're still just squishy meatbags. Because they're still just people. And so even though they might be the strongest in your army, again, you can't send your hero character straight into battle. It's not gonna go well for you. Every time I play with my kids, even when I have my Empire General on Griffin, I always like to send him up against impossible odds as he goes forward to take down, and really it's never worked for me to just charge headlong into battle like that. I always end up with a dead general, and you think I would learn my lesson, but I haven't. The problem with playing these armies is even your toughest characters are still just an average Joe. They're just better than the average Joe. And last but not least, oh man, are these armies expensive. Even with Warhammer's price increase here recently, you see the Astra Militarum gone up to 168. Fortunately for now, Spearhead is only 145, but I just looked on the website this morning and you can't buy Spearhead Cities of Sigmar because they're sold out. These armies are going to be expensive because you need a lot of models to play them. Just like you need a lot of models to paint, you're going to need a lot of models to play. And unfortunately too, with that, you are going to find that there's an expense in transporting your models, because you got to move a lot of those things too. And so that's going to be really tough for you. So if you want to play these armies, it's going to be expensive. I suggest starting with smaller skirmish games, right? Whether you play one-page rules like I've really been getting into, or 40K and Age of Sigmar, I suggest maybe trying to get into Kill Team or Warcry and see if you can start with that and then build up your army that way. That way you're not painting an entire horde all at once, but maybe just a fewer models to start. Regardless, these are my heroes. These are the ones that I want to play. It's funny that I play the fantasy game and still want to play just as the average Joe. Maybe it's the hero. Maybe it's the story of the average guy standing up and fighting down the giant terror, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes coming out on top. Hey, I'd love to hear what you think. Do you like to play the regular human armies in these types of settings, or do you prefer the more specialist elite type armies? Let me know down in the comments. I'd really love to interact with you. And if you're enjoying my wargaming content, man, would it mean a lot to me if you subscribe to the channel. I'm at about 800 subscribers at this point, and that's almost 1,000, which is a really big milestone for YouTube. So it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.